Yes.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Illinois Green Party series. I am your host, David Rich, and we have a very special guest tonight, Michael Jaggard, a member of the Green Party. And we're going to talk tonight about politics, the Green Party, the duopoly, voters' rights, voter suppression, which is a hot topic nowadays. Michael, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Doing very well, thank you. Having some technical difficulties, but I can overcome these things. Okay, so let's get it started here. So let's talk about your interest in why you became a member of the Green Party in the first, when it happened, why it happened. Go ahead.
Sure. So I started researching different political parties going into 2020. Of course, being a first-time voter, I voted in the Democratic primary in Illinois, and then I done more research, did some party alignment and four corners testing, and they found that I was very close to the Green Party and very close behind the Socialist Party of the United States. And so I looked into what for the Greens, what they stood for, and I said, "Oh, this makes sense. This is what I believe in." So come November, I voted for Howie, and I said I want to join the state Green Party. So I had gotten a job the following April, and with my first paycheck, I got my membership sorted with ILGP.
Oh, nice.
So I joined in April of last year. So we're coming up on 1 year now, and it's been a great time. People have been welcoming to new ideas. I take a very interesting take on some things, especially among voting. And so, that's risen up to now I'm sitting on the coordinating committee as I was appointed there in December.
That's great. Why don't you tell us about, I'm also on the coordinating committee. Unfortunately, I don't have time free when they actually gather for meetings, so I'm a little out of the loop. I just basically tell Anna what I think, and I ask her to tell them. So why don't you tell us about the coordinating committee? What is it? What does that mean? What do we do?
Sure. So the coordinating committee is kind of, I would say, think about it as an executive advisory body. So you kind of have a bicameral interaction between the coordinating committee and the full party membership.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we might get recently at our last meeting, we were asked to sign on with the Wisconsin Greens to sign on to a message saying we want the national party to support lowering the voting age to 16. So the coordinating committee took that up and said, okay, we'll put it to coordinating committee vote to sign on. And so it was added to I guess you could say, a schedule for the next meeting. And that went through pretty smoothly, I would say. And then any member can add a motion to the coordinating committee. And then sometimes things go out to the general membership for comment. So the general membership will give comment, and then a final decision will be made by the coordinating committee.
So we have to that whole notion of getting the national party to advocate for 16-year-olds voting is still pending.
Actually, it passed on a vote. I believe it was eight yays, 1 nay, and 1 abstention. Was the final roll call vote. So we have signed on to that. That being said, I believe it will, and I could be wrong, could be discussed at the national convention coming up in July.
July or national convention. Do you know where it's being held?
I do not know at this time, sir.
Okay, that's fine. Oh, sir, I don't think anybody's ever called me sir before. That's really interesting because that's like I said before the show, that's something I was talking about to my co-host on my radio show last week. He's a lawyer, very progressive, very leftist. He's a Democrat, but he's a very leftist Democrat. I asked him, like, do you think that 16-year-olds should be able to vote? And his knee-jerk reaction was, no. I'm like, but they have jobs and they have incomes and they pay taxes, and so that's taxation without representation. He's like, huh, that's interesting. So we didn't really follow up with it. So let's talk about that now. Without mentioning any names, I'm just curious, with the one dissenting vote or the one opposition vote, not dissent. Can you give the argument? Do you know what the argument was against it? Don't mention names.
So that's not a problem. So the main argument against it was that they're not mature enough to vote.
They're just too young.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's probably the most common argument, but they're old enough to drive. They're mature enough to drive a 3,000-pound vehicle and have a job where they have responsibilities towards the public and other people, and handle their money situation. And I mean, I had a checking account, I think, when I was 16, because I had a job. So all these things are true, but they're not mature enough to vote. Most people that I know don't have the moral nor intellectual wherewithal to vote. So I don't think age has anything to do with it. I mean, most people I know vote for really, really bad reasons. Lesser of two evils, that kind of thing, or the popularity contest, or I just love him and he said, I love how it's hair. So, stuff like that. So I wouldn't exactly attribute age to that process. I know 16-year-olds are a lot more mature than some of the 50-year-olds I know. Anyway, but that's just me. So, well, that would be great if the Green Party came out as advocating for that, because I think that's important. I really do.
Yes, of course. I could see it going both ways. There are people that I know that are very mature for their age, and then there's some people that just aren't. To be completely honest,
chronology and maturity don't always go together.
Right.
Go ahead.
So, yeah, maturity doesn't really correlate with age.
Right.
And I hadn't done enough research, so I abstained.
That's responsible. It's okay, folks, by the way, to say I don't know. Until you've thought it through. That's perfectly acceptable. You don't always have to say yes or no. You can say, you know what, let me get back to you on that. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most mature things you can do is say, I don't know.
Absolutely. You see an awful lot of people taking positions on things that they really don't know anything about when it comes to climate change and voting and voting rights and just like socialism. Like, yes, 9 out of 10 people who are vehemently opposed to socialism have absolutely no idea what it is. I mean, not a clue.
Right.
So things like that. The anti-vaxxers, stuff like that. I mean, are you a scientist? Or the anti-climate change, the climate change deniers. I'm sorry, are you a scientist? Do you know anything about this as a scientist? No, you don't. Okay. Molly May Brady is God and she knows everything. That may be true, Molly. I know. I've seen your post before. You're pretty smart. Okay, so let's talk about voters' rights and voter suppression and that sort of thing, because that's a hot topic now, even without the 16-year-old thing. Go ahead on that, because that seems to be your expertise. So start the discussion for us.
So kind of set some playground. In Illinois, all you need to vote, with exceptions, of course, is your signature. Right. And I've worked as an election judge, most recently in the 2021 consolidated elections. And so someone comes in, we'll make sure they're registered with the county. We'll say, can you sign this paper? We will check it against our computer screen. We'll say, all right, have a good day. Here's your ballot key. Because we use electronic machines. Right. So we're like, here's your ballot key. Have a great day.
Right.
Some states.
There's no requirement for ID, identification.
Correct. And Illinois even passed a some sort of right to vote amendment in 2014, I believe, which basically made it harder to implement voter ID.
Oh, good.
So
that's promising. So real quick, people are often befuddled, baffled as to why you wouldn't want somebody to ID themselves for something as important as voting. Like, why is asking for an ID so it's a big deal? Well, because IDs are not required by law. You don't need to have, if you don't drive, you don't need to have a driver's license. You don't need to have, you're not required by law to have a state ID either. They're handy. If you drive, you need to have a driver's license, sure, but you're not required. Therefore, as just a basic right of citizenship, you can't ask for ID for something as fundamental as voting because people as a citizens are not required to have IDs. That's my understanding as to why it's, because a lot of people are like, well, why wouldn't you just ID them? What's the big deal? Well, because you're actually violating their civil rights, literally. Go ahead, sorry.
Sure. So, I didn't have an ID until I got my first job.
Right.
Because I never had a use for it. And even
Right.
now, I don't really need it because I take public transport to and
Right.
from.
And you just described a massive demographic of people who this whole you need to have an ID to vote targets, which is minorities, because they tend to make up the most of the lower income class. I hate that word lower, but you know what I'm saying. And then that's why it's also such a hot topic, is because you're literally targeting them. This country's done enough to make these minority people structures in such a way that causes them to be poor, redlining, and also denying them mortgages and loans and so forth. Now you're just doing one more thing to add on top of that. Molly Mae Brady said, "I've been an election judge since 2014." That's cool. Okay, so yeah, good.
Sure. So with these laws that you're seeing in southern states, they are explicitly targeting minorities. People who maybe don't have a use for photo ID.
Right, like you just said, they don't have a driver's license because they take public transit. And what do they need a state ID for? Nothing. So, okay, right. So then, why you can't, so to expect them to show an ID for voting is just really, God, it really upsets me. God.
Yeah, something as crucial as your right to vote in any election that you qualify for, you shouldn't hold such a major barrier. Imagine all the paperwork you have to get a state ID. I needed my birth certificate. I needed like 2 proofs of my current address.
Right. A credit card statement. Well, some people don't have credit cards.
Right.
That kind of thing.
We needed official bills. Well, right. I don't have a credit card, so we had to use like my medical bills, for example, to show them, hey, this is where I live. Yes, I am who I am. You also need a social security number, or a social security card, my apologies. Some older folk don't have their SSN, their social security card, or it's, very old, or they've lost it. So now they have to go through the process to get a new SSC.
Right. Yeah, so, no, exactly. There are a lot of limitations to that for sure, and I don't know why people think it's okay to impose this on people. It's ridiculous. Okay. Voter suppression. Let's talk about voter suppression and third parties. One of the greatest phrases or quotes that I heard from hosting this show, and unfortunately I don't remember who said it, was that party suppression is voter suppression. Which was interesting because it's very much true after I thought about it. There's about they speculate about 25% of the adult or the able voters in this country don't identify with either Republican or Democrat. So these people just go unrepresented. I mean, that's it. That's not democracy. That's not how democracy works. Everybody should be represented in one way or another. So this ties into getting names for third-party candidates to get their names on ballots. It's egregious how many more signatures a third-party candidate needs than just a Democrat or Republican. I mean, before I joined the Green Party, I was a member of the Libertarian Party, and they asked me to run, and I did, and it wasn't something that we were taking seriously. We were just trying to get Democrats and Republicans to spend more of their money on stuff. This was right before COVID hit, and I think it was like the Democrat or Republican needed somewhere around 1,000 signatures to get out on a ballot for like a federal representative. A third-party candidate needed like 12,000. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Of course it is. It completely is. And, I'm going to run for state rep in 2024 once I'm old enough. Democrats and Republicans need 500 in my district, 500 signatures. I need something like 3,000 or more to avoid being kicked off. Right.
Well, right. And then there's that. Then you have to pad it considerably because these fascists, Democrats, and Republicans will go through the petitions like, oh, if that T isn't crossed well enough, it might be a Y. We're going to take that name off the petition. Stuff like that. And they spend a lot of money to do that. Molly May Brady is saying, I used to be a party of the I used to be a member of the Libertarian Party. We had to get like 5 times the signatures. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's insane. Now, with COVID happening, because it also has to be physical signatures, you have to get it in person. Now, when COVID hit, the Green Party of Illinois and the Libertarian Party of Illinois actually got together and sued the state and said, this isn't fair. We can't even go outside. And whatever judge decided said, okay, you can do it electronically too. And which was useless. I tried electronically, and you'd think that would be like really great and fruitful, right? Nope, nothing. I got like 12 signatures. Like nobody cares. So, it's very difficult. I actually talked to a guy who's a Republican. I don't know, Don something. He's running for Illinois Supreme Court, and I brought up this very issue, and he says he agreed 100%. He's like, no, it's ridiculous that he's like, in a democracy, anybody should be able to be put on the ballot. That's what democracy is. So, yeah.
Yeah, and if I can speak to the third-party voter suppression, I think the big part is we're shut out of anywhere where we're given any form of nonpartisan publicity, right? We're shut out of presidential debates. We're shut out of gubernatorial debates. We're shut out of Senate debates.
Yeah.
Anywhere where we have a chance to pick up votes, they're like, no.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. And I mean, I've talked to Howie Hawkins before on this show, and I've watched his live streams too. Extremely intelligent man who knows the issues very, very well. Even Jo Jorgensen, who ran for the Libertarian Party, the presidential nominee for that, I had her on my show a couple of times. I met her in person. She's actually from this area. She's got a PhD in psychology. She's a psychology professor. She's incredibly intelligent. And though I'm not a libertarian in the Libertarian Party anymore, libertarians have a lot of good things to say. And she would just, either Howie or she would have just schooled just about anybody on that Democratic or Republican platform on stage for a debate. Either one of them would just destroy them. And I really think that may be what they're afraid of, is that you just have a lot of really highly educated people that have wherewithal concerning the issues that will just speak, just run circles around these guys. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, you look, I've seen some of Howie's shows before that he does on YouTube, and he's very, very smart. I will give him that. And I mean, between Joe Biden and Trump, he would destroy them.
Oh,
he seems level-headed, like he'd actually obey the debate rules. I mean, we saw the dumpster fire back in September.
Yeah, that was just that was embarrassing for the country.
Yeah. I want to highlight this comment from Molly. She says they have to have like 5% in the polls. It's actually 15%. They raised it. It's 5% to get federal money. They raised it after Perot. After 1992 with Perot, they raised it.
Because he gave them a run for their money, didn't he?
Yeah, he was like...
I remember him. That might have been a little bit before your time, but I'm gathering you're about 18, 19 years old. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
yeah, no, that was early. Yeah, that was early 1990s. No, but he whipped him. I mean, he really.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what would have happened if he had stayed in the race, and not dropped out.
Yeah.
Because he wiped the floor with both. I believe it was Bush and Clinton. If I'm remembering my elections correctly.
I think that's right. That's the timing would make sense. I'd have to look it up, but yeah. Well, yeah, no. It had to have been because it was 1992 election. Yeah. So okay, yeah. Yeah, no, you get other people in there who know what they're talking about, and they can talk outside of the political box that we've established in this country. And that's probably one of the reasons why, unfortunately, in a different sense, why Trump got voted. They want, they really wanted to stir it up, and I'm not against stirring it up. I just mean something very different about stirring it up than Trump supporters do. So,
Right.
so well, that's very cool. And when you tell us about your, upcoming candidacies, your campaigns in the next year or two.
Sure. So, first one is my local school board.
That's a good start.
So, I've just watched our school board just not listen to the people that they affect, which is our students.
Right.
And I'm like, no, this needs to change. Recently, Illinois Supreme Court decision, I don't know if you've heard about it, basically made Illinois mask optional.
I did hear that. I heard that they blocked the mandate. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. And our school board right away said masks are now optional. And I'm like, great. That's such a great job. And I can't tell if you can tell I'm sarcastic here.
Yes.
And so I'm like, no, this needs to change. And this started back in 2020 when so many students spoke out against using what's called a block schedule. So you'd go to periods 1 through 4 on Monday and periods 5 through 7 on Tuesday and then repeat. And, and students are like, let's do the schedule where we go to all of our classes each day, only go until noon, and then teachers are available until 3:30 to answer questions, any questions that the students have. And I advocated for this plan. School board shot it down 6-1, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And went with the block schedule. And I'm like, okay, let's change this. Let's put a voted student delegate on the board. So it'd be voted by the students in March at around the same time that the consolidated elections would be held. They'd hold 1-year terms. They'd start each July or right away for that first election, of course. Get them on the board so that way they can advise the board from the student perspective. Because we have students who are delegated by the administration of like, share your opinions on behalf of the school, but they're appointed by the people who make the rules, right? You're not getting any chance to push back against that administration because they're appointed by the administration. And so you're not going to get the students are just going to, those student delegates, you could say, that are delegated by the school, they're just going to say, oh, we're just going to go with what the school board says because that's who gave me this job.
Right. That definitely seems like there's a conflict of interest in there. That probably should be attended to, that sort of structure. Did you see the comment down here, Albert Shaw, I believe it's pronounced? Though I believe in voting rights, I also believe same-day registration should not be for a general election. There should be a cutoff that applies to the general public. What are your thoughts?
Right. So you're basically going to be cutting off people who qualify to vote. Like, let's say the election is on day 50. Actually, there's 40 days of early voting. So let's say it's on day 41, 40 days of early voting. Let's say you make cut off 7 days before the election. Well, those people who turn 18 after that cutoff can't vote. They just can't.
Oh, that's a really good point. That's a very good point. Okay.
So if you have that, then the, people we're making up here for this example can't vote now in this election because you don't have same-day registration. If you have that, then you're able to have everybody who qualifies, and that is so important for our democracy to work,
100%.
is to not shut anybody out who is qualified.
Right. Okay. There you go. That's a very excellent point. And just curious, Mr. Shaw, if you could just describe in just a few sentences why you're opposed to that, I'd like to read that. Talk about it. Can you talk more about what's going on in some of the southern states concerning a lot of the voter suppression? Like they don't think that they're suppressing anything. Like there's the whole, is it Georgia or Alabama? I can't remember. Where like you can't hand anybody in a voting line, election line, like water or food. And
Yeah,
I saw somebody from that area, a politician in that area, saying, no, he's like, that's always been the rule. It just wasn't a formalized rule. Now we just made it formalized. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
sure. So that was in Georgia. I
Georgia.
remember when that was passed. And I remember that's like, okay, but you have lines in majority minority, blocks or precincts or, voting areas that are out the door down the street and can take 6 hours. There are people waiting in line for, 4, 5, 6 hours. You need to use the bathroom. You need to drink. You need to eat, especially if it's like a primary that's held in the summer where, Georgia humidity,
In Georgia,
it's
Georgia's hot.
no, you know, you have areas where, but you also have to highlight the disparity. Well, that works for white voters because I can just walk in, cast my vote, and be out in 5 minutes. I saw on, I think it was NBC, where it was showing the disparity between the lines for Black or Hispanic majority precincts, um, and ones for white majority areas. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, if they're about equal in population, but that's because they're cutting down the amount of voting locations in in Black majority areas.
Yeah.
So it starts at the top here with cutting down voting locations. Let's say an area, a county, Black majority county, has 50 voting locations. Well, now they just cut it to 30. So those people that went to those 20 that are now cut now have to distribute themselves to more voting locations. Then it's trying to wear people down. You're trying to wear those voters down so they don't see it worth it to vote. So you cut down the places. Then you say, well, you can't give them support material to go vote. You can't give them water. You can't give them food.
Right. All right. So, okay. Sorry. Did you want to finish
No.
that thought, or did you want to? Federal
So
elections
yeah.
happen every. What's that?
So yeah. So you're just cutting off, people who, those minority people who are supposed to be protected by the VRA.
Right. Okay. Federal elections happen every 2 years, and individuals have time to plan ahead according to their state laws. I just think a cutoff is fair if it is known ahead of time. Well, okay, and there is a cutoff right now. And there is specifically stated, I know, at least in this state, that if you turn 18 after the cutoff, then, well, too bad. That's just how it goes. So that I think that's part of my goal and my point is that my thought is to the general election, not the primary. Okay. Oh, great segue. And thank you for the comments, by the way, everybody. I appreciate it. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So yeah, throw them out there. Ask us questions. Make comments. Primaries in Illinois, as far as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that anybody can vote in any primary, but you can only vote in one primary. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, for example, if I were to go to vote, I get the option between for this upcoming election in December, or my apologies,
November.
in June. In June, the primary in June.
The primary, yeah.
I will have three options. I'll have Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian. And that's even if Libertarians are running in my area because they're recognized by my county, not the state.
So, they made it. They made 5% of your county.
Yes, I believe it was because they ran a coroner and got 25% of the vote.
It only takes one office to establish it for all offices?
That is my understanding, yes.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay.
It's at either the district level. So, for example, our own Anna received 5% of the vote in her District 85 election.
That is
so had it not been a redistricting year, the Greens would have been established in that district.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
So
now I'm angry. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
And in District 93, the Libertarians would have been established District 93 covers basically Peoria, the city of Peoria. And you would have had the Libertarians been established, again, if it hadn't been leading into a redistricting year.
Okay. Interesting. That's very interesting. How do you feel about districting and redistricting, and how do you feel about political boundaries like that? Real quick, one of the things that annoys me about political boundaries as they stand is that there's these sort of like odd boundaries, like in the middle of one town, or could be a boundary line drawn. You have like two different districts in one town. That seems to create a lot of inefficiency and complexity that doesn't need to be there. Like I don't understand why they don't just do it town by town. Go ahead though. What do you think?
Sure. So, just as a refresher, districts need to be equal in population within certain percentages. So,
Oh, that's her. Yeah.
But the lines that we're seeing come out of Springfield are absurd. For example, I think it's State District 93 for the House extends from West Peoria to Bloomington. And for those who maybe don't know their geography, they're in different counties, and there's one county in between them, and it takes an hour to get between the two areas.
Oh, wow.
So it's the center of Bloomington is cut out where the Democrats are. It basically comes up over to this black majority area of Peoria to create this Democratic majority district. And that combines with a Democratic House district that's Peoria itself, that then creates a Democratic Senate district.
Okay.
And there's other examples like at the federal level where the Democrats straight up crack Chicago into like 7 different districts. And
is that good or bad?
That is horrible.
Okay.
There's a site out there called Dave's Redistricting, and I've been able to draw much better maps, much fairer maps.
Interesting.
I actually did a English paper in college on redistricting in Illinois, and I calculated that using the last 3 statewide elections, Democrats should be receiving 11 districts and Republicans around 6 districts, thereabouts. Though I would recommend a 10-7 map.
10-7, 10 Democrats, 7 Republican?
Yes.
Just because of the distribution of population?
Yes, exactly. But Democrats would complain because it's like, oh, we lose Sherry Busto's seat in, over in Rock Island. They lose the seat in East St. Louis, or it's at risk at least. They don't have anybody south of like I-80.
Oh, wow.
They have no chance of anyone, at least the way I drew the map, which I say is at
but
least
there's like 6 people that live down there.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a beautiful part of the state, don't get me wrong, but there's not a lot going on down there.
Yeah, of course. And most of the people that are there are Republicans and college students.
Rural tends to be a lot more Republican, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have those dots like Bloomington, Peoria, Rock Island, Springfield, East St. Louis that are Democrat. But that's in the case of a federal district where you're looking at 700,000 people, it's really not that much. And it kind of makes it lean, if you want to say R+5 to R+10. But it's not going to make it Democrat unless you really, really try.
Right. That's interesting. And there's also the issue too. And I remember I lived in Portland, Oregon for about 12 years. And I remember this was there was a lot of outcry from people outside of Portland. And it turns out to be the case in probably any state that has a big city, like especially the top 3. Well, California's got so many big cities, it doesn't really matter. But New York State and Illinois particularly, because of New York City and Chicago, as goes Chicago, goes Illinois. Kind of thing. And there's a lot of people in the rural cities that don't like that. And I don't necessarily blame them. Because I mean, the things that happen within a city are not always similar to things that happen in rural areas. Do you have anything to say about that, or?
Sure. So you have New York where it's downstate versus upstate. You have Illinois where it's Chicago versus the rest of the state.
Right.
And people say like, oh, Chicago dictates where we go. And I'm tending to believe that, especially on the federal level. But if you look at the state level, look at the governor election. We elected Rauner in 2014. Yes, in 2014, we elected a Republican senator in 2010. And those were Republican wave years, don't get me wrong. But I think if you're a state politician, if you're a Republican, you need to win over the collar counties, Kane, DuPage, Will. And if you're a Democrat, you kind of need to win over those college counties. Think Knox County, Peoria, McLean, the county that Springfield in. Sorry, I can't remember its name.
Okay.
So that's the state level, but there's a distinction between state and federal. Federal, definitely, way Chicago votes, that's how you're going. Which brings me into something I want to do if I'm elected to the General Assembly, and that's the Electoral College Vote Allocation Act, which would allocate proportionally Electoral College votes. Obviously, as a state, we can't get rid of the Electoral College. So if we could say if you get 5% of the statewide vote, you get one electoral vote. That way it's not a winner-take-all system.
So is that like ranked choice voting?
So it can be used with ranked choice voting, but I wouldn't see it used with it. It would be a pick one, and then it would be distributed proportionally.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I haven't thought of a way to make it RCV.
Are you for RCV?
I am in certain situations, especially in single member districts, such as governor, senate. But when we get to multi-member districts, in Puerto Rico, they use what's called a single non-transferable vote for multi-member districts. And they have 11 seats territory-wide. And you pick one, from what I can tell. You pick one, and then the top 7 or the top 11 get elected. And every political party is represented there. From your far right Project Dignity to the Puerto Rico Independence Party, to even independents, nonpartisan politicians, are able to get elected through that system.
Very interesting. Okay. Albert Shaw is asking, does your idea have a limit on electoral votes, or if you hit your percentage, you get the vote?
Sure. So basically what we would do is we take the number of electoral votes. So I believe Illinois has 19 now. You would divide that by, you take 100 divided by 19. And you take the largest party, so Democrats, probably. They would get, let's say, 55%. Well, they'd get 55% of the vote share. Then it would go to the Republicans. They get 38%. So they'd get about 38% of the vote share for the Electoral College votes. Then you go down to, let's be honest here, the Libertarians. Let's say they managed to scrape by and get 5%, 5.5%, I believe is the number I looked at needing. Then they would get it, and then if there's any electoral votes left over through rounding, then that can go to an independent, the Greens, Constitution, Conservatives. So it'd be basically a proportional representation system.
Okay, very interesting. Albert, does that answer your question? Okay, very cool. What do you think about electoral colleges?
I mean, unfortunately, as a state, we can't do anything about it, but I'd like to see it abolished.
You would like to see it.
And I'd like us to just change to a 3-round election system. So
we have 1 round. What is that?
If we can't use RCV, obviously I'd like to use RCV first, but obviously some people aren't for that. And it would be, you'd have a primary in the spring in like February. Then in like June, you'd have the first general election. And then in November, you'd have a runoff if nobody gets 50%. But I want to prerequisite this saying I would rather see RCV be implemented. Much more rather see RCV implemented.
Than have an electoral college.
Than have an electoral college or that 3-round system.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think it's likely that at least on the federal level they're going to get rid of it?
No,
Okay.
no, because if you get rid of it, right, people will feel like, oh, I can finally vote for my favorite and not worry about, oh, 11,000 votes are going to determine this election, such as what we saw in Georgia, where less than 0.1% decided the election result between Trump and Biden, um, or the 30,000 votes that separated um, 30,000 votes, I believe, was what the difference was between Trump and Biden, Trump and Clinton, my apologies, in Michigan, which is approximately what um, Miss Stein received in 2016.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see. Mr. Shaw is saying I had a similar thought, but would cap the number at 3 for a secondary party. Quote: winner take most to help secure a victor through the system. What do you say to that?
I don't think that's fair because imagine then you'd only be able to cap them at a 15% support. Let's say the Greens get 15% in it, get 20%. Well, then they theoretically qualify for a fourth vote, but under that, you're saying you're capped at 3 electoral votes. So, well, now you're saying, oh, you're disenfranchising 5% of the population because you're capping it. You see what I'm saying?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll want to respond to that. That'd be cool. Um, okay. What about democracy as a general political philosophical concept is something that has been controversial since like Plato. When Plato, we got the idea of our democratic republic literally from Plato's Republic. I mean, that's where it comes from. The ancient Athenians in what is now Greece kind of came up with that idea, at least on a major scale. Not that it was a true democracy then, because it was just still for the aristocracy, and arguably it's not even a true one now because the voter suppression we're discussing and the people who run the country have a tendency to be the ones that have all the money. Harvard put out, I believe it was Harvard, put out a study that they did, and I'll have to get the link for you later. That showed the massive disproportion between how the general public thinks of policies and how the government actually votes on them. And the greater percentage of it is far more consistent with how rich people want the way things to be, and not the rest. It was just simply to show that your vote is in a sense kind of useless. What do you think about that?
Sure. So that's interesting. I want to share something that um, someone said. Kelly Ross Kraut, running for lieutenant governor in Arkansas, basically said that in red states, progressive policies can pass. You look at raising the minimum wage in Arkansas. You look at weed legalization or at least weed legalization in Mississippi. The weed actual legalization in places like very red states that voted for Trump by 25, 30 points, in North Dakota, South Dakota, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
progressive policies can pass even in red states. And you look at poll after poll that shows support for things like same sex marriage,
Mm-hmm.
supporting transgender individuals, and even outside of LGBTQIA, you have support for raising the minimum wage,
Right.
For weed legalization, and our policymakers that we elect that are supposed to reflect our values don't do that. And the Democrats will say, "Oh yeah, we'll give you a legalized weed. We'll give you um, we'll give you a living wage," and then like take a living wage for example, Democrats said, "Oh, we'll put it in we'll put it in the budget. I believe it was back in January of 21. We'll put it in the budget, or it was some sort of bill. And then the parliamentarian for the Senate said, no, you can't, you can't do that. And they're like, okay. And that was the last we heard of it. So, the Democrats say that they're fighting for us. They're not.
No, not even close. Neither party is fighting for us.
Oh no.
It's all big money at that level. I think that was one of even Plato's concern with like a full just a pure democracy. That's why he preferred a republic over a democracy. Is that democracy tends to be, not that I think it's turning out to be any better. Democracy is mob rule. Like if 51% of the people think that it should be this way, or our legislators should be a certain way, and they could be wrong as the day is long. That's how it's going to go. Actually, there was what Plato advocated for was called an epistocracy. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not.
Okay, epistocracy. Epista comes from I believe an ancient Greek word. I don't remember exactly the full word, but I know that like in philosophy, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that's concerned with knowledge. What is knowledge? How do we know what knowledge is? Which is an interesting question. That kind of thing. But basically, it's that the only people that can hold political office are the people who are credible in that specific office. So, like it's a lot like a technocracy where you have like the politicians would be scientists and doctors and judiciaries, people highly educated in whatever given area that they're actually representing. And I always thought that was a very cool idea because, like, with a democracy like we have now, a system like we have now, that's how we got somebody like Donald Trump, who does not know how to run a country. But because he was popular, or whatever reason, he got voted in. That's a terrifying situation when people have that much power and have no idea what they're doing. That's not okay with me. He even called climate change a hoax. That's a very dangerous thing to say when you have that much power. That kind of thing. And he's wrong. And that's the problem. It's like we want people who know what the hell they're talking about. We want people who are right about what they're advocating for. You know what I'm saying? In order to make a wise, good social national situation occur. Because nowadays it's just anybody. I mean, I heard a guy from he was some sort of politician from Georgia talking about voting, the voting laws and stuff like that. He's like, well, I think voting should be hard because it's such a precious part of our, democracy or something like that. And the interviewer is like, but it's a right. He's like, yeah, it's a right, but it's also a privilege. I'm like, no, it's not. It's either a right or it's a privilege. I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about. How is it possible that you get to have authority over me and you're a moron? Sorry, go ahead.
Sure. And you were saying like Trump doesn't know how to run a country. I remember the first week of lockdown, he's like, oh, just go drink bleach. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is coming out of the mouth of the President of the United States, one of the most powerful countries in the world.
Yeah.
Is this for real?
Yeah, no, it's pretty disgusting. No, it's true. Okay, so your plans for running for the school board, so you don't need to be 21 to run for the school board. I'm guessing that's why you're running next year?
Yes.
Okay, is that a tough thing to go through? What do you think? You think you got a pretty good shot?
It'll be interesting,
Okay.
especially since our constituency is quite conservative. But I think it's being a nonpartisan position. People are more open. I think if it were to be partisan and having that green next to my name, it would just be unanimously Republican. But I think I might have a shot. I'm trying to get the backing of students.
Oh, there you
who
go.
Are
the ones that matter.
The ones that matter, that get affected by this stuff, that unfortunately cannot vote.
Right.
Except for like the much older seniors. So
yeah, I was 18 halfway through my senior year, so I voted. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 18 for my senior year, so I was able to vote in the primary and the general election. So
You seem to know an awful lot about this stuff, which I think is encouraging. You're giving me hope for our future. I like that. What are you studying in college? Are you a poli-sci major?
Right. So I'm hoping to study poli-sci. I'm going to do a special program at ICC that's 3 years, and then I'm going to finish off my bachelor's at a 2-year school, or at like a 4-year school. Sorry.
Right.
Um, Currently looking at a couple schools here in the U.S., here in Illinois, I should say. So we'll just have to see how that goes.
Do you want to make a career of politics? Is that your goal?
Yeah, it would be very nice. I think I have a lot of good ideas. I
For
bring an
sure.
interesting perspective to the table.
Yes.
And so, yeah, and I think it's something that maybe I could do.
Okay. Do you have to, I don't know how like school boards and elections and stuff like that run specifically or in detail. Do you need ballot? Do you need signatures on a petition to get your name on the ballot, or says you do
Uh,
even for that?
yes, so we do. We will need signatures for the ballot, and they have to be like registered voters and stuff. So, um, but I think I need like 50 signatures to get on the ballot.
Oh, okay.
Um,
That's not bad.
yeah, that's not bad at all. Um, the school board next to mine actually has their elections this year.
Where are you? Where do you live?
So I live in Dunlap, specifically Medina Township.
Oh, yeah, I've
And I
ever
live in,
heard of that.
sure, so we're the town just north of Peoria.
Oh, okay. Which is kind of central Illinois, right?
Yeah,
Ish.
central Illinois, yeah.
Okay.
We're about an hour and a half from Springfield, about an hour from Galesburg, hour from Bloomington.
Yeah, no, okay. I definitely know Galesburg. I had aunt and uncle and some cousins that lived out there. We used to go there all the time. So we have about 3 minutes left. So I want to ask you about like beside like what kind of things would you introduce to the school board? I mean, so we talked a little bit about it, but like anything else, like how do you feel about like Common Core mathematics? Is that even an issue to you? And I know a lot of parents are upset about it. I looked at it. And I have a philosophy of science degree. I studied logic and the philosophy of mathematics. I think it's a great system. It's a better, more efficient system than the one I was taught when I was growing up. But parents aren't having it. What do you think? Let me generalize that question. What do you think about parents determining what kids are taught in school, in public schools? What do you think about that?
I think a parent has the right to determine what their child learns, but that's what we have homeschooling for. That's why Illinois is a very easy state to homeschool from.
Oh, is it good? I didn't know that.
I actually homeschooled for 10 years
Oh, okay.
before I went to public school. And so, if you are so determined to say, oh, my child can't learn about, LGBTQIA education, or my child can't learn about contraceptives, or my child can't learn CRT, which is critical race theory.
Yeah.
Well, then teach your child from home. We're trying to prep the next. We're trying to prep these students for the next generation of critical thinkers,
Right.
and they need all the information. We can't just cherry pick one side.
Yeah, there's some. I don't know if it's a state or multiple states, but at least one state is they either just passed it or they're trying to pass it, where teachers can be fined $10,000 by teaching anything to the kids that contradicts religion. Holy cow! Yeah, I don't know if they mean just Christianity or if they mean any religion or what. I don't know what they mean. Like, what if something? I mean, if a teacher says something that contradicts Wicca, are they going to freak out or not care? I mean, pagan religions. But that's pretty outrageous.
I think that violates the First Amendment.
Of course it does. The critical race theory is a kind of a non-issue at that level of education. That stuff is taught at like high-level law classes in law school.
Right.
That's where it started. That's where it stayed. I don't know of any school in the country like a grade school that's teaching critical race theory to kids. Now you should be teaching them about the sins of our past and the awfulness of slavery and what happened. Absolutely, there's no doubt there. But things like critical race theory, I don't know why everybody's freaking out about it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't get
it's
again, like socialism. Most people don't even know what it is.
yeah. Um, I do want to say to education, especially amongst history, I was lucky to be taught, you know, that our country did horrible things, even by more right leaning teachers um, who would teach us about the Japanese internment camps in the United States during World War
Yeah,
II. But then the next year failed to enforce Dunlap mask rules, right? So
right. Yeah, see, I didn't
that's
even
kind
find
of
out about
funny.
the. Yeah, I didn't find out about the Japanese internment camps till well after I got out of high school. I was like, wait, what? We did what? That's crazy. As recently as the 1940s, that happened. That's insane. Yeah, no, there's, and then all of a sudden, like all sorts of, the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, the 1919 Chicago race riots, because a little black girl went and walked over into a white beach, and like everybody freaked out and started burning down the city. These are things you don't hear about a lot. Everybody's like,
Right.
oh, racism is done and over. That's like pre 1950s America. Nope, not even close. So okay. We're at the towards the end of the show. Any final comments? Anything else you want to plug or anything?
Sure. I'm just trying to break in. I'm still kind of new to the Greens, so I'm still working with them, still doing, I would say I'm doing a great job. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank
I
you. This was great.
So this was a great discussion.
Yeah, good, good, good. We're definitely going to have you back on again, and I want to keep a close eye on your career. I think that's what the Emperor said to Anakin Skywalker. I don't mean it that the analogy that strictly, but yeah, no, you seem like you got a lot of potential. I'm very happy to have you in the party with us. That's just great.
All
All
right,
right.
thank you so much.
Absolutely. Michael Jaggard, everybody of the Green Party. Thank you for tuning in to Illinois Green Party Series. I'm your host, David Rich. Till next time, be good, be green.